The eagerly anticipated Endpoint Privilege Management has been released under public preview and is definitely the talk of the town, at least for this week. Announced at Ignite 2022 and under the Intune release of 2303, this is definitely a feature that will make a difference. But why do I say this? Well, up till now, IT admins have had to decide whether to set their users up with either local admin accounts or standard accounts. And therein lies the inflexibility really. If we have local accounts, this can introduce some security risks, and with standard accounts, it generally means you need more resources and attention to those user requests. This is where EPM can step in. It allows you to raise the permissions of those standard accounts to give temporary admin access. It also allows you to move towards your zero trust model, and as well as giving you that just-in-time security approach. So let's have a look how we set this up. So first off, let's quickly go through the prereqs for setting this up. So as it says on the Microsoft documentation, it will apply for Windows 10 and 11. From a licensing point of view, while it's in public preview, which it currently is, you don't need a license, but you will need to activate EPM within your Intune tenant. Now, when it becomes generally available, that's when you're going to need a license, and it will be part of the Intune suite, or you can buy a standalone license. From a Windows client perspective, take note of the fact that there are specific versions and you'll need to update your Windows devices to make sure that it will work with this. So as it says here, I've got a Windows 11 22H2 device at the moment. I'm going to test this on, and it needs to have the update of 502.229.13, which if we have a look at the details of this is the build 2261.1344. But go ahead and check your devices before you enable this for those devices you want to deploy it to. Now, just one important other aspect here is that it does apply for both hybrid Azure Active Directory join or Azure Active Directory join. So they're both supported here, but Workplace join is not. So where do we find it and how do we activate this feature? So within your Intune Admin Center, logged on as your global admin, within the Endpoint Security option, you'll find an entry for Endpoint Privilege Management under Manage. So we click that. And this is where it's going to give you the information, at least within the preview of the feature. So it's telling us basically that you must activate this feature for your tenant during public preview. Once it's activated, it can't be undone, which until you deploy a policy to your devices, they're not going to be controlled by that EPM agent anyway. So it should be safe from that point of view. So let's go ahead and activate this. And there we have it, we've been activated. But one point I should have mentioned initially was that I'm logged on as a global admin, and you will need either a global admin or Intune service admin account in order to activate this experience. But as part of the whole feature rollout, if you go into your tenant administration and then into roles, you'll notice that there's some new built-in roles that have been created. So you've got the Endpoint Privilege Manager, which will allow you to manage, all the policies and details around privilege management. But you've also got the Endpoint Privilege Reader, which gives you access to view the policies and also view the reports. So back within the Endpoint Privilege Management pane, we can start looking at the details. Now, initially, you'll see that you've got reports here, and we won't see any information, obviously, until some telemetry data comes through from our devices. You've also got some reusable settings, which we'll go into in a bit. But really, the core of this is the policies. Now, there are two types of policies. If I go into them, you can only select Windows 10 and later at the moment. And you've got elevation rules and elevation settings. Now, the core of this really, or the baseline that you need to set up first, is the settings policy. And that's because the settings policy really is what activates the EPM on the device client. Essentially, what it does is it provisions a small set of components on the device that match up to your rules that are deployed. And that's why I think you need to set this settings policy up first. I would suggest looking at the documentation around this. It's quite broad, and you need to understand the concepts in the way that settings and elevation rules work. An elevation rule will essentially use a policy to configure the behavior for applications or files your organization allows when the applications run on the device. Now, you can be specific to certain files and to applications, and this is where you're really going to get controlled around your environment. So let's go ahead and initially set up the elevation settings policy. We're going to do that. We're going to create it. We need to give it a name initially. Elevation settings Windows 11. We'll skip the description for the moment. And this is where we get into the detail here. And what I want to mention first is that by default it's enabled, right? But this is where you would switch it off. So if you disable this after you've deployed to your devices and the EPM agent is downloaded, then it will take up to 7 days before it disables on the device. So if you keep checking your device and it's, there's still implications on that device, it won't be removed until after 7 days. So we'll keep that switch on as enabled. And the next thing we want to do is send data to Microsoft. Then clearly we do want to do that. We want to collect the information so that we can do some reporting. If I turn that off, you'll see that reporting effectively disappears. So I switch that back on. And the options here are that diagnostic data and manage elevations only. So this is going to capture EPM and elevations only. If we keep it with diagnostic data with all endpoint elevations, then it'll also capture anything that's outside of EPM. In this last setting, default elevation response, this is quite powerful and has a number of connotations, so you need to be quite careful in this respect. Now, what this represents is the configuration for how the device is managed for elevation requests that aren't directly managed by a rule. By default, it's got non-configured setting, but the other options here are denial requests and require user confirmation. Now, the not configured will basically give you the same effect as deny all requests, and it may be that in a scenario where you've got standard accounts and you only want to open up elevation options for specific files and applications and lock it down, that's where you would create and set up denial requests, and that is probably going to be the typical scenario for most IT admins. The other alternative is you can choose the require confirmation. Now, this represents the behavior really of elevation requests on files that aren't managed by an elevation rule policy. And in this scenario, the user receives a simple prompt to confirm their intent on the file. But you can also pick two options here, and they're validation rules. Validation rule might be a business justification. In this scenario, the user would just write in a box their justification, or you could be a Windows authentication where they'll have to put in their user credentials in order to move forward. So in my scenario, I'm going to actually set this to denial requests because I want to create this as a baseline of denial, and then go and add individual rules for files and applications. So we select that and we're going to test this through. Now, I'm not going to add any scope tags. I generally don't, so we'll click through that and then I'll go through to assignments. Now, I'm not going to do all devices. You need to be selective, and this is where you do need to put a little bit of thought about which devices you deploy this to. My particular occasion here, I'm going to include my Windows 11 devices. I've got one device within that group, and then I'm going to select the next. Before I actually create this though, after review, I want to go to my Windows device quickly. On this device, I've got the VLC media player downloaded on my device, and I want to install this. Now, I've got two versions, but on the application, the executable, if I right click, you can see I've got run as administrator, but where we're going to see this new option is show more options. Now, at the moment, I don't have this EPM agent deployed, so you don't see the option. But once we've deployed this, this should open up and give us our new EPM option. So let's go ahead and deploy this settings policy, and hopefully we'll see the updates come through. So back in my Endpoint Privilege Management profile, I'm going to complete this and click the create. So we'll go ahead. Now that should go through. It's created it successfully. We can see it within the EPM panel there. So actually that didn't work on my specific Windows 11 device. Now just a word of notice really, this might be teething problems as it's still in public preview, but I was running a VM on a Mac OS device using Parallels. So what I've had to do is revert to Hyper-V on a Windows server, and I'm trying again with a different VM running Windows 11. So let's get started on that. Right, so I'm over on my Windows 11 machine, and what I'm going to do is go into the download of my VLC media player here. If I right click it, you'll see that you've got the normal options like run as administrator, but if I go down and select the show more options, you should see this new option appear, and that's the run with elevated access. So if I click that, we now get this you can't run this app as administrator. Now that's expected because up to this point we've denied all access, so that's expected behavior. I also want to show you the files as part of the agent that are installed. If you go into program files and then into Microsoft EPM agent, this is where the agent files are contained. So this is one way of checking. You can see policies and log folders there. This is one way of checking that the agent has actually downloaded onto your device or client. Okay, so I've popped back into the Microsoft admin, into an admin center here. I've opened up my elevation settings. I'm going to edit the settings. And as we see, I've still got it enabled, obviously, and we've got denial requests, which we've just seen. So I'm going to change this to require user confirmation and add the business justification validation in here. So we're going to do that, review, and save the settings so that we then can go back and see this working on my device. Okay, so we're back over on my Windows 11 on Hyper-V device here, and the first thing I want to do is just show you the account that I'm using. It's Patty here, but as you can see there's no administrator notification, so this is a standard user that we're using here. Now let's go back to the VLC media player. As we did before, I'm going to right click this, go down to show more options, and we should see the run with elevated access. There it is. So if we click that, we're now hopefully going to be prompted for our business justification, which is what we set up in the settings policy. We can just put some text in here, put in whatever you like, and then we're going to just hit the continue button. But I just want to make you aware that there are some niggly issues, particularly with experience with this VLC media player. So I'm going to expect this to come up because I've tested it already, where it's going to say something went wrong. Now with this particular case, you can go into the media player and actually change some of the options here to make that go through. So I've picked that up on some other blogs that people have written already on this topic. So if we unblock where it says this file came from another computer, that should allow us to go through the next stage. So let's right click, show more options, do it again, and it should come up with the business justification again. There we have it. So we put in our text as required, and then this should allow us to install the application, because that's what this is doing. It's running the install, and there we have it. So we should be able to install. Now there is another issue like this where it says something is wrong, and again this is specific to VLC, but it will allow us to continue and install this player. So be aware that maybe with some particular files you might experience some issues. Other applications that have been deployed have gone through quite smoothly. So that's essentially step one, where we looked at denying admin access to files or applications, right, by setting that denial setting within EPM. What we want to do now is look at how we isolate down to an individual file or application when we want to open up and elevate a specific application to a user. So we're going to go through and set that up and see it working. Okay, so I'm back within the Endpoint Privilege Management section of Intune Admin Center, and this time, rather than create a settings policy, we're going to create an elevation rules policy. Now, I've already got one, and I set one up for Acrobat, which still needs the administrator rights to install. So let's have a quick look at this. We'll look at the details. If I scroll down, I can look at the config details. And we've set it up as user confirmed. I'm giving it a name. Let's look at the actual details here. So this is the rule name that I've given it. You can add a description, and you can either configure this with a user confirmed or automatic. Okay, now when you choose automatic, it means that it should automatically run, and there should be no pop-ups, and basically it should automatically install. However, you might want to go further and add user confirmed. Now in that scenario, you can either add a business justification, Windows authentication, or both. Right, I'm going to go for user confirmed and business justification, and the reason I want to do that is, despite the fact that we are allowing and raising the permissions for admin rights, I want to be able to capture the text basically that each user puts in, so that I can track it back for reference purposes. So we'll keep it as that. Now you have to give the name. In this case, this is the name of the install, because you need admin rights to do the installation. You can either then choose a source, right? It's not necessary, but you can upload a certificate here, and you can actually make user reusable settings, which we'll go into in a minute. So the idea being, you can either use a certificate or you can just use the file hash. Now if you want to go and set up the file hash, I can show you how to do that. So basically what you need to do is run up PowerShell, and you need to then type in the get file hash and then the location to the executable. If you run that, it will give you a hash. Okay, so you need to copy that. Once you've copied that, you can then put that into your configuration here, and that's what I've got here. It's the same hash for this install exe. Okay, so we save that, and then we deploy that to our devices, our select groups, or all the devices that we want to target. So once you've completed that setup and deployed it to your devices, you're going to need to wait around about 20 to 30 minutes depending on how busy the platform is. You might want to sync your devices in between, and then hopefully you're going to get, when you run the report, you're going to see that you got a success for your device. Okay, at this point you can go over to the device and try it out. So back over on our Windows 11 VM, let's test this out. So first off, what we want to do is we'll go to the file, the install file. We're going to right click this as we would do normally, show more options, and then run with elevated access. It's going to give us, or prompt us for the business justification, which we configured. So we put some text in here, hit the continue, and then hopefully this is going to go and install as we expect it to. And there you go. It's starting to do the download and doing the installation. It's completed, and we can hit the finish button. So just to finish up here, we're going to quickly just show that the application runs. So it's going to applications, open Adobe Acrobat, and just make sure that it runs as expected, and there we have it. Before we finish up here, just remember that there are two more elements to this functionality. We've got reports, elevation reports, and managed elevation reports. We did describe what they were. I don't have anything in here at the moment. It will take 24 hours or more before you start seeing data. So once you push your policy through, check up on this and have a look at the data. The other element is the reusable settings. Now we mentioned this when we were setting up the policies. I haven't set one up here, and basically what you need to do is this will be used when you decide whether you've got a cert file or whether you're going to use a hash. If you need to use a cert file for the application, You can set it as reusable, which means each time you go to use that application in different ways or different groups, you can actually reuse it. Obviously, repeatable cuts down on admin effort and time there, but go ahead and check that for yourself. I hope you found what you wanted out of this video. Obviously, this is still emerging, it's in public preview, there will be things that change, and no doubt I've got a few things slightly wrong. Please hit me up, send me any messages if you think I have, or ask any questions. But for now, thanks very much.